the US administration could do about that?
No, not this administration. This is an administration that doesn't have any plans, went into a war without any debate. I mean, John, you and I remember Bush and Cheney, for all their many sins and crimes, they went to Congress. They went to the UN Security Council. I can't believe I'm actually praising George Bush and Dick Cheney. But they
sometimes the most revealing moments in a debate come when someone stops arguing about policy and starts questioning the decision-making itself. In this discussion, the focus quickly moves beyond the usual talking points about Iran and national security. Instead, the conversation turns to a deeper issue, whether the war was actually based on a clear threat or whether it began without a coherent plan at all. And once that question is raised, the entire justification behind the conflict begins to face much closer scrutiny.
Welcome to you. Mehdi, look, you have been a very consistent opponent of the Trump administration and pretty much all its works. You are firmly of the view that the war in the Gulf is a war without a plan, and you've got that in common with most Americans, including a significant slice of Republicans, as well as with the British government, Keir Starmer, and a lot of British public opinion too. So all of that said, what is your theory of why this war began and when it began?
It's a good question, John. Luckily, we don't need a theory. The one good thing about this administration is they often say the quiet part out loud. So Secretary of State Marco Rubio last Monday, over a week ago, went to Capitol Hill and he was asked, well, where's the imminent threat? There's no intelligence of an imminent threat. The Iranians were negotiating with the Omanis. The Omani foreign minister went on American television and said the Iranians have agreed to everything that Trump wants. This was the day before Trump attacked and Israel attacked. And Rubio says, well, we were told that the Israelis were going to attack Iran, and once they attacked Iran, Iran would hit us, so we hit them first. That is what the Americans define as an imminent threat. A rather ridiculous answer, I think you'd agree. If Israel was going to attack Iran and they were worried about getting hit, the simple solution would be to stop Israel from illegally attacking Iran. So Israel plays a big role in all this. Benjamin Netanyahu hasn't hidden it. He said he's been dreaming about this war for 40 years, and Donald Trump is the first president who listened to him. Senator Lindsey Graham, a prominent Republican hawk, one of the big backers of the Iraq war, he said on the weekend, he said, I went to Israel and I coached Prime Minister Netanyahu on how to get Donald Trump to join this war.
Okay, now to that line of criticism, you have that in common with obviously many people there in the United States on the Democratic side of the aisle, and others too are not necessarily, deeply politically aligned. So can I ask you this, Mehdi? What plan do you think you would support to confront the threat from Iran, the threat that Iran poses to the region and to the West?
But the discussion quickly moves to a more fundamental question.
Watchdog. Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapons program, despite lots of constant false claims in the media and in certain Western capitals about that. And as for the actual Iranian nuclear program that they do have, which is not a weapons program, they, as I say, were negotiating with the Trump administration in good faith after the Trump administration, don't forget, tore up Barack Obama's nuclear deal, which dealt with the Iranian nuclear issue in a way that experts said worked for at least a decade. And they were negotiating with the Trump administration 2 weeks ago. There was a deal on the table. Trump's supposed to be the big deal maker. He's an erratic figure, as you know. He goes from wanting to be a war hawk one day to a negotiator the next day. The deal was on the table. But according to Marco Rubio, the Israelis were going to attack because Netanyahu's wanted this war, as he says, for 40 years. This idea that there was some massive threat from Iran to the region, I would point out right now, the country that is bombing two Middle East countries as we speak is Israel, not Iran. Israel is bombing Iran and Lebanon. 700,000 people in Lebanon have been kicked out of their homes by Israeli airstrikes. Kids are getting killed. 83 children killed in Lebanon just in the past week by Israeli forces. So I think we got to kind of recalculate and think about which country is the one that's occupying its neighbors, which country is the one illegally attacking other countries in the region. By the way, which country in the region, John, has nuclear weapons? It's not Iran, but it's another country that starts with I.
Okay, so Mehdi, I mean, you have, for example, the International Atomic Energy Authority with you when you dispute the idea of an imminent threat from Iran, certainly in nuclear terms, and the authority absolutely denies that there was a threat of a 2-week hence attack, nuclear attack.
Insane. No one believes that.
They say that's entirely wrong. But if I talk about a threat from Iran, I'm thinking perhaps more about the proxies around the region, the many proxies, forces and militias around the region. I'm thinking about the threat of the active threat of terrorists acting at the behest of Iran in various parts of the world, including the West, including Europe. I'm talking about what we see in this country, Mehdi, as you will know well. Threats to individuals who the regime in Tehran looks on with disfavour, the threats of harm, of death carried out through proxy gangster groups. I could go on, but that does add up to a significant threat, doesn't it? How do you address that?
So again, let me just qualify your question. There are, of course, terrorist threats, and we've seen terrorist attacks from Muslim groups over the last couple of decades in the West. Majority of those, John, I think we'd agree with Al-Qaeda and ISIS, which are not groups backed by Iran. They are Sunni jihadist groups, and Iran is a Shia
but
country
other groups, Mehdi, were and are backed by Iran, and the threats I described in this country.
You mentioned the UK, John.
Well,
now the focus shifts from justification to consequences.
The vast majority of Islamist jihadist terror threats in the UK, the US, do not come from Iran. As for threats in the region, let's just be very clear. Why now? That's the question. Was there some increased terrorist threat that we don't know about? There's no intelligence saying that. And in fact, John, if we're worried about terrorism, this war is going to increase terrorism. We're already seeing increased chatter of threats. We're already seeing intelligence warning of threats. The Daily Mail, not a paper I normally source, is reporting that the Trump administration is suppressing US intelligence, warning that there may be new attacks on the homeland as a result of this war. When you go in and you assassinate, you murder a foreign head of state who also happens to be a religious leader for many people in that country, you don't think his followers might want to take retaliation?
Yeah.
You don't think there might be blowback? John, you and I covered the Iraq War. In 2003, Tony Blair was warned by the Joint Intelligence Committee that if you illegally invade Iraq, there will be an increased terrorist threat to the UK. Blair ignored that warning, and we got the 7/7 attacks a couple of years later. God forbid that we get retaliatory terrorist attacks as a result of this war.
Yeah, but I do invite you, Mehdi, to address the threat from Iran. I mean, you may be right that the weight, the volume of threat, just by numbers, by volume, that are detected and intercepted by the security services in this country, special branch police and so on, that may lie, by volume more heavily elsewhere. But there is a threat from forces, individuals, gangs that are paid for and inspired by Iran, at least according to reliable reports. Mehdi, you have seen them from police and security forces in this country.
But hold on, John. You're a British journalist in the UK. I'm a British-American journalist in DC. The British government is not attacking Iran, so I'm not sure where this conversation is going. The British government, in fact, has refused to join, thankfully, the attack on Iran. And the British public oppose an attack on Iran. And as far as I'm aware, there's no intelligence suggesting Iran was about to hit the UK. So under international law, John, as you know, you can respond against a threat to your country, but it has to be an imminent threat. It has to be self-defense, or it has to be approved by the Security Council. Iran, as far as we know, was not about to attack the United States or the UK. And therefore, there was no justification for this war. If you want to deal with the threat from Iran, as Barack Obama did, especially the nuclear threat, you do a deal. And the whole point of the nuclear deal was to deal with the nuclear issue, and then you deal with all the other issues. Clearly, there are many other issues with Iran.
And that comparison to Iraq changes the tone of the debate.
Has to be dealt with. The idea that assassinating a foreign head of state and bombing Iran is going to make people in Britain safer. I mean, most experts I'm reading right now, John, are saying once the dust settles, this regime will still be in place. They'll still have a leader called Khamenei, who's probably more anti-Western than his father, and will probably have a greater threat against our citizens. So I'm not sure what security threat this war is resolving.
Look, I recognise the lack of an immediate link between the threat that you're describing there that could be related to the attack that's taking place in the Gulf now, and more broadly seeking your view on the broader threat which does exist from Iran and how, ideally, in your view, that might be addressed.
I'm agreeing with John. I'm saying there's clearly a 40-year grievance between both sides, have legitimate grievances against the others. The US government with the hostage crisis and the attacks on US troops, the Iranian government with the Iran-Iraq war and the shooting down of its airline and the sanctions. We can go back and forth, but that's why you have negotiations between two countries. The idea that an illegal war by the US and Israel, of all countries, is going to resolve those issues rather than make them worse. My fear is we've just made the next 40 years even worse in relations between us and them.
Yeah, it's not part of my line of argument that the attack on Iran happening when it did was entirely clearly justified. I've spent pretty much every day of my life discussing arguments where that is very heavily questioned. But I am putting it to you that there is a threat in the form of Iran, at least in the shape that it was before the war broke out.
And I'm saying that threat will be much worse after we've killed over 1,000 of their people, killed their leader, bombed their oil depots. I'm saying that threat's going to be much worse, John. So if this is about security, we've done a very bad job of it. Just as the Iraq war made us less safe, not more safe, the Iran war will make us less safe, not more safe. That's why it's the most unpopular war of my lifetime. That's why the British public, American public, are much smarter than our politicians and some in our media. They don't want this war because they learned the lessons of Iraq. Unfortunately, many of our leaders did not learn the lessons of Iraq.
I mean, how do you read, as a matter of interest, how do you read President Trump's thinking at this moment? I know that's not always an easy task. Do you think that the economic interests of the people of the United States and the United States economy and public opinion, which is not with President Trump, do you imagine that will act as a constraint on him and his administration in the conduct of the war?
But perhaps the most surprising part of the debate comes next.
Yes, being super unpopular, having high gas prices, petrol prices, would make a president think twice. But these are not normal times, and this is not a normal president. He's pointed out that he simply doesn't care about growing casualties, about high oil prices, about the length of this war. He's simply doing what he wants to do, as is so often the case. He behaves kind of like a mob boss, even in relation to allies like the UK and Canada. And look, I don't understand, to be honest, and I don't understand many things that Donald Trump. The reasoning here, this is a guy who ran on an anti-war platform, who got a lot of votes from independents, even some Democrats, even many Muslims, who thought this guy is going to keep us out of foreign wars that the Democrats have gotten us into. And what does he do? As soon as he comes to office, he bombs 7 countries in his first year. He starts 2026 by attacking Venezuela, and now he's trying to do regime change in Iran. He's pissed off a lot of people, as you mentioned in your introduction, including some in his own base, high-profile people. And I think it's going to come back to bite him. Right now, he was already on course to lose his party, the House of Representatives, the lower chamber, in the midterms in November. Now he probably will lose the Senate as well, although they're trying to pass a voter suppression bill right now in Congress to try and depress turnout, because that's the Republican solution to everything, to try and rig elections. But look, in normal times, yes, all these things would be hurting a government. He's got super low opinion ratings, his lowest approval ratings, I think, ever right now. And this is, as I say, I'm amazed, John. Most wars in the US, even which are unpopular before they start, once American troops are committed to action, the public gets behind the war. Happened with Iraq, happened with every other war. Not this time.
I mean, you'll know, I need to say, Mehdi, the constraints may be slightly different where you are now, but here you used a pretty strong expression, and I just need to apologise to listeners who might have been offended.
I apologise to listeners and to Ofcom. I forget I'm in the US, not the UK.
Well, it is a bit of old-fashioned British good manners there. I mean, last question, Mehdi. I mean, look, what happens in the future in Iran, and therefore more widely, is a cloud of uncertainty. Do you happen to believe the US administration could influence what follows from this? And if so, how?
In what sense? Sorry, John.
In terms of whatever succeeds this regime in Tehran, because the Ayatollah has gone, layers of leadership have gone. It's possible, and you suggest, we could end up with another regime similar in character to the one which was there at the start of the war. And the implications for that for the region are unknown. Is there anything in your judgment the US administration could do about that?
No, not this administration. This is an administration that doesn't have any plans, went into a war without any debate. I mean, John, you and I remember Bush and Cheney, for all their many sins and crimes. They went to Congress. They went to the UN Security Council. I can't believe I'm actually praising George Bush and Dick Cheney, but they at least had a debate in public. They may have lied about the WMD threat, but they had a public debate before the war. Trump just did this overnight with no discussion, no debate, no justification, and no exit plan. And now he's jumping around saying, I want unconditional surrender. Oh, wait, no, the war is over. I don't think they know what they're doing. Remember, they claim to have had a list of leaders they wanted to do a deal with after Khamenei was killed, but they accidentally killed them, John. That's how incompetent this government is. They bombed the people they had lined up to succeed Khamenei.
I wonder what you made of Tony Blair, who you will remember well from your time here, and his rebuke to Keir Starmer for not getting involved in the war at the earliest stage.
I think the best thing Keir Starmer has ever done is not listen to Tony Blair in Iraq. I know he listens to Blair on many things. Tony Blair is a man I believe should be in The Hague, not giving advice to modern British governments. He wrecked his own Labour premiership with the invasion of Iraq in 2003. Keir Starmer's already a lame duck prime minister in many ways. I'm not sure why he'd want to wreck his premiership any more than he already has by joining an unpopular, illegal, unnecessary war that will only endanger British citizens. So I'm glad to see Yvette Cooper and other members of this government pushing back against Blair. But this is who Blair is. He's sitting on Donald Trump's ridiculously named Board of Peace. He's always wanted to cozy up to Republican American presidents. And finally, people are not listening to him for once.
What makes this debate so interesting isn't simply the disagreement between the interviewer and the guest. Political debates often feature strong disagreements. What makes this exchange different is the deeper question that slowly emerges as the conversation unfolds. At the center of the discussion is a simple but important issue: how wars are justified in the first place. Governments usually present military action as a response to an immediate and unavoidable threat. The logic is straightforward: if a danger is imminent, then action becomes necessary. But throughout this debate, that assumption is repeatedly questioned. Was there truly an imminent threat, or was the situation more complicated than the official narrative suggested? Another theme that runs through the conversation is history. The Iraq War appears several times as a reference point, not because the situations are identical, but because it illustrates how conflicts can produce consequences that planners never intended. Many wars begin with the promise of greater security. Yet history shows that the long-term outcomes are often far less predictable. Supporters of the intervention argue that confronting adversaries early prevents larger crises later. Critics argue that preemptive wars can destabilize entire regions and create new threats rather than eliminating old ones. Both perspectives appear repeatedly in foreign policy debates, and both carry serious implications. And that's why discussions like this matter. Because once a war begins, the consequences rarely remain confined to a single battlefield. They affect international alliances, regional stability, and public trust in political leadership. So the real question may not simply be whether the war was right or wrong. The deeper question is whether the decision-makers had a clear plan for what would happen next. And that's where the debate continues. What do you think? Was this conflict a strategic necessity or the start of a much larger problem that could shape global politics for years to come? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy thoughtful breakdowns of major political debates like this one, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next analysis.